Hi, I'm Yitzhak Berger, and I teach Biblical Hebrew at Risha. It's very often pointed out that in Parashat Vayeishev, we have Yosef and Yehuda parallel one another. Both of them leave their family, leave their brothers under one set of conditions or another, and they encounter similar things. Both of them are victims of deception. Both of those deceptions involve clothing. And in one form or another, each of these brothers has to confront the challenge that they're presented with. In the case of Yosef, we know that Yosef was challenged with the temptation of the wife of Potiphar, and Yosef does not succumb to temptation, and we know him as Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the righteous one. Yehuda, on the other hand, as is pointed out, in failing the test initially and in succumbing to the temptation when his own daughter-in-law seduces him because she wants to be the vehicle through which his name is perpetuated, Yehuda's failure, in fact, is what makes him the appropriate choice to be the forerunner of kingship. Because after all, Yosef is somebody who is a tzaddik. The tzaddik's not necessarily the one who can relate to the challenges and failings of the people. And indeed, questions can be asked about the leadership of Yosef by the end of Sefer Bereshit, when Yosef asks for all of the money of the Egyptians and effectively enslaves them by the end of the Sefer. In the case of Yehuda, Yehuda becomes the model for kingship. It's said precisely because he's capable of failure. Even as, following that failure, he is able to acknowledge his sin and confront without embarrassment, or shall we say overcoming that embarrassment, really to show how such a challenge needs to be confronted and how one needs to confront the reality of having initially failed. By the end, Yehuda and Tamar have two children, Peretz and Zerach, and one of them, the one who was trying to get out of the womb first, has a little red band tied onto his hand, and this of course recalls the story of the birth of Yaakov and Esav, when Esav, the one who does come out first, we're told is red. Yet another story where there was a struggle as to who's going to get out of the womb first. Yehuda's child, Peretz, who comes from this relationship, is the one from whom kingship emerges. And in turn, there's a relationship here to Yaakov, who is again not the one who has the redness associated with him, much like Peretz is not the one who has the redness associated with him. Apparently generating a connection to Yaakov when he was born, trying to supplant his brother before Yaakov develops into the Yisrael that we know, overcoming some of the tendencies he was born with. It emerges then that despite Yehuda acknowledging his wrongdoing at the end of this chapter, it's almost as if there's a vestige of that wrongdoing that's in the blood. The very name Peretz, the one who tried to get out of the womb first, overcoming the brother who had the red band tied on him, that name Peretz suggests he is the barrier breacher. And it's from him that the line of King David comes. So we're left with an anomaly where the forerunner of Judean kingship and of Israelite kingship is somebody who, on the one hand, has the capacity to confront challenges like this and to deal with failure and to show how to deal with failure. And on the other hand, the capacity for failure and to overstepping boundaries is still there. I just want to briefly point out what others have pointed out, which is that in fact, before kingship emerges, the Tanakh does not allow this to go unaddressed, and that in reality the much-discussed connection between the story about Yehuda and Sefer Ruth effectively addresses this problem and makes sure that the ancestry of King David has this problem, so to speak, cleansed from it. Because in the case of the story of Ruth, we of course have a very similar situation. We have two brothers who die, much as in the Yehuda story. We have a potential third son who's too young, although in the book of Ruth it's only hypothetical. And then ultimately, there is a woman who is challenged to use clothing as a form of deception, and to try to see to it that she becomes the one through whom a distinguished Judean figure, continues his progeny that will lead to kingship ultimately. And in the case of this Yehuda Tamar story, there is that failure which eventually leads to Yehuda admitting and leading to this mixed legacy. Whereas in the story of Ruth, Ruth takes that legacy and turns it on its head. She is charged to trick Boaz, but in the fateful moment in the story of Ruth, she and Boaz decide that they're going to go through with what needs to be done legally in the morning, and in a way that takes the characteristics that were embedded in the Judean legacy and perfects them, so that as soon as King David emerges at the end of Sefer Ruth, we have a legacy that is perfect and pristine. Whereas Yehuda sets the standard for kingship in that he is capable of failure and then confronting that failure. In the case of Boaz and Ruth, we have the standard that Judean kingship will eventually be charged to live up to, a pure and pristine standard. Shabbat Shalom.